A boat left Horn Island without him, and 2 days later, everything changed. One friend's own words don't add up, and almost no one noticed. Welcome to Gossip Loom. This is where you get your true crime updates, always.
I am a former Army interrogator, human intelligence collector. I was trained by the United States government to analyze your language, body language, posture to identify deception. I did it in the real world through interrogations, through source operations, and through strategic debriefings. I've got tons of certifications. I'm an expert at this.
You guys get ready to leave out of there, getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. That is critically important information. All right, right here, he's talking about when his buddy Bart pulls out his buddy Wyatt's boat. So Bart is on one boat and he's pulling out Wyatt's boat. Wyatt's boat is the one that you've heard about was taken on water and sinking, and that's why they had to leave Horn Island. I want you to pay attention to this.
To where we're out of all this, all this chaos, because we left at 4:30 and there was still.
We left at 4:30. We left at 4:30. This guy just said that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. Very specific time. Now, how did he know it was 3 o'clock? Brandon Tatum didn't ask him that. If this was an interrogation, that's a key question I would ask. How do you know it was 3 o'clock?
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie. Katie.
That's Katie McCormick that he's talking about. Katie McCormick said that's not true, but let's listen. This is at 3 o'clock. This happened at 3 o'clock.
And Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving,
well, when we were leaving, so it would be 4:30, because he's already said we were leaving at 4:30.
Nolan was sitting by the boat.
Nolan was sitting by the boat. How do you know, Warren, that Nolan was sitting by the boat? The last time you laid eyes on him was at 3 o'clock. It's now 4:30. This is your timeline. Timeline is everything. At this part of the story, he's at 4:30. But he just said less than a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and
how do you know that? The last time you laid eyes, your exact words, on him was 3 o'clock. You're now talking about 4:30. Now listen what happens next.
My buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving.
Now, in the interest of honest analysis here, if they were both on the boat and he heard his buddy yelling at Nolan, not him, by the way. Warren wasn't yelling at Nolan. Even in his own story, he wasn't looking for Nolan or yelling for Nolan. And in the beginning of part 1 of the interview, he says, Nolan was like a brother to me. He was my best friend. More than a friend, though. He was like a brother to me. But Warren's not the one looking for Nolan, not the one yelling for Nolan. He don't even go over and lay eyes on him again, according to his own story that he's telling us. But he hears his buddy saying, hey, Nolan.
The boat's having issues. And no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear. It's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on.
So your buddy asked Nolan multiple times and you never did. Your brother, your best friend. But notice he didn't say Nolan said, I'm going to stay here with Katie who I'm sitting with next to the boat. No part of that exchange would have given Warren the details to know that Nolan was sitting by the boat with Katie, which was his exact words. He contradicted himself. That's blatant deception. It needs to be immediately exploited and interrogated.
At 4:31 in the afternoon on the 4th of July, a boat pulled away from Horn Island, Mississippi, carrying 6 friends back toward home after a holiday spent out on the water. 18-year-old Nolan Wells wasn't with them. 2 days later, a park ranger discovered Nolan in the very waters where he'd been swimming earlier that same day. What unfolded during the roughly 90 minutes before that boat departed the island has since been picked apart by investigators, by Nolan's family, and by millions of strangers online. Yet there's one detail that almost everyone seems to have overlooked. Tucked inside an interview meant to clarify the situation and defend Nolan's friends, someone close to him made a statement that's hard to square with a different version of events he'd given elsewhere. Not once, twice. And both versions simply can't be true at the same time. Before we dig into that, I want to say something directly, because the numbers make it clear that a lot of you watching don't actually follow the channel yet. Far more people are watching these videos than are subscribed, and if you'd rather catch the next update on this case the moment it drops instead of stumbling onto it days later in your feed, subscribing is the simplest way to stay ahead of it. It's free, takes a few seconds, and genuinely helps a small channel keep covering a story that bigger networks may eventually drop. Now let's get into it. Before we walk through the boat, the timeline, and the interview clip that's been torn apart online, it helps to understand why Nolan Wells' case turned into a national story so fast. This was a case built almost perfectly to push a local investigation into the national spotlight, an 18-year-old with his whole future ahead of him, a grieving family desperate for answers, a friend group whose public statements have been questioned and, in places, don't quite line up, and a snowball of viral claims, some credible, some never verified at all. Add well-known public figures amplifying it on their own platforms, and the story outgrew its local origins almost overnight. That attention isn't inherently a bad thing. Nolan's family deserves real answers about what happened to him. But the bigger a case gets, the harder it becomes to separate what's confirmed from what's just speculation. More rumors circulate, more people read the same evidence differently, more pressure lands on investigators and witnesses, and more incentive exists for online creators to stretch details simply because controversy pulls views. Everyone tied to this, Nolan's family, his friends, investigators, the media, is now living under a level of public scrutiny most people never have to face, let alone while grieving. And before we reduce Nolan to a timeline, a phone, a boat, or a pile of disputed statements, it's worth remembering who he actually was. Somewhere along the way, the internet turned a real teenager into a case file and an argument. We're not going to do that here. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18. He'd recently graduated from Ocean Springs High School and, according to those who actually knew him, was a young man headed somewhere good. He played football and had already begun the recruitment and enrollment process at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he planned to keep playing. Friends remembered him as big-hearted, the kind of person who made others feel seen. He wasn't necessarily the loudest one in the room, but he was the one who remembered your name and actually asked how you were doing. The night before the 4th of July, Nolan cooked salmon for his parents. His mother, Christine Wansley, has recounted that evening in several interviews since. Nolan hugged her, told her he loved her, and left to spend the night at a friend's house ahead of the holiday trip. That ordinary goodbye turned out to be the last time she'd see her son in person. Nothing about it hinted at what was coming. It was just an everyday moment between a mother and her son, the kind families live through constantly without ever imagining it could be the final one. The next morning, July 4th, Nolan headed out to Horn Island with a group of friends. Horn Island sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a barrier island reachable only by private boat. There are no major structures, cell service is limited, and on a holiday weekend, hundreds of people can be scattered across the surrounding water doing exactly what Nolan's group had planned, spending the day together, celebrating. Based on multiple accounts we'll go through in detail, Nolan was last seen in blue swim trunks, no shirt, sunglasses pushed up on his head. People described him as upbeat and social, the type whose presence alone could lift an afternoon. That's the person worth holding on to as we move into the disputed timeline, because from here, the story turns complicated, contested, and increasingly tangled up in online arguments. There's been endless back and forth about the timeline, the boat, Nolan's phone, and who said what. But underneath all of it is still an 18-year-old who cooked dinner for his parents just hours before leaving for what was supposed to be an ordinary holiday trip. He never made it home. That much doesn't depend on a theory, a rumor, or anyone's interpretation. Whatever really happened in those final hours, Nolan Wells was a real person, and his family is still waiting for answers.
Brother to me. Nolan lit up every room he walked in. 4th of July, everybody was out there. Nolan rode out on the Triton, and then we had a Palm Beach, 18 Palm Beach. There was 4 guys on that. The rest of the group, which was ranged from maybe 10 to 15 or 16 people on my buddy's tide line.
Yeah, so y'all pretty much having a good time. And then you guys get ready to leave prematurely.
Right.
And like, what? Explain that, because you guys got there around 10.
Yeah.
It's now 4:30.
Right.
People are still out there partying and
Correct.
they're having a good time, but something happened to where it necessitated you guys to get the boat up and running. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I had a girl come up to me and say, "Hey, your brother just got in a fight." And obviously I have a younger brother, and that's who she was talking about. And I was freaked out. So I walked over to the beach, and I didn't walk over, I ran over. I made a beeline, I didn't talk to anybody, put my drink down and walked over there. And my brother was kind of angry, and there was a lot going on, but someone was getting pulled away. I don't know who it was. And my brother was like, "Oh, I just got in a fight, and this guy punched me in the face," and I punched him right back. And then went to the ground, and my brother put him in an arm bar. And
was Nolan involved in any of this?
Absolutely not. When I was over there was a bunch of younger guys like my brother's age, and I mean, Nolan, I never saw Nolan over there. Yeah. Absolutely not. And okay, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
So you get ready to go. There's an issue with the boat.
Okay, yeah.
And this is what
this led up to that. That's what I was saying.
So the fight happened with your brother, or a little scuffle. I'm assuming that it was cleared up.
Right.
You got your brother out of that situation, and then how did you find out that this boat is sinking?
Well, I walk back over, and like we're probably around each other for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't thinking anything of it. I told my brother, I pulled my brother off the beach, and I was just like, "Listen, get in the water, hang out with us, calm down." I mean, he was calm, but I didn't want anything else to happen, And so once I got back over the boat, I got on the Triton, and the Triton had probably about 6 inches of water up to the transom. And I was freaked out because I'm good friends with Wyatt, and that was his boat. And, no water's coming out, no access water's coming out. And it was a big issue, because I think the reason was because there were so many people getting on and off the boat, and at some point the boat was very, very crowded, and there was just a lot of people on, so that it drags water in. And eventually, I think over time, we were out there for a couple hours, the boat just started filling up with water. So I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater. And so the motor wouldn't trim down. I mean, my buddy would go to trim it down from the console, and it'd trim down, and then it'd come right back up. And so Wyatt's trying to throw a rear anchor, so we're caught, and he's, yelling at people. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And eventually, I'm like yelling at other people, trying to tell them, calm down, like, the boat could possibly sink, and I'm not paying attention to everyone around me. I was paying attention to my buddy's boat. And that's what all my other friends that were on that boat were doing, trying to solve the problem.
So you're on the boat now, the water's getting up to the point where the boat may be disabled to where you couldn't get it out from Horn Island. So what happens after that?
Wyatt jumps to the water, tries to throw a rear anchor, and my buddy Meyer, you're sitting, looking, trying to pull trash out the bilge. And the bilge is basically a pump that pulls the access water out the boat. So the bilge was failing to work. So any excess water was just sitting in the boat. It wasn't getting pumped out. And I looked over the gunnel, and I looked at the release hole for the bilge, and it was even with the water. So, I mean, we're all freaking out. All of our, we're not focused on anything else other than the boat. Well, then eventually my buddy Bart on the tide line is like, "I'm going to pull y'all out to where we're out of all this, all this chaos." Because we left at 4:30, and there were still just as many people there, if not more, than when we got there. I mean, probably around the same amount. I mean, it was crazy. Like, there was a lot of people. And, I mean, eventually Bart pulls us out. You know, we left at 4:30, but we really weren't pulled out away from everybody. We were probably about a quarter mile out, and we had the towing strap pulled from, you know, Bart's port side cleat or starboard side cleat, and he was on our starboard side bow. And so it was rubbing on his power pole. So Bart turned around, pulled up next to our boat, and we were just trying to get it situated. So that's when Wyatt called Cito. And Wyatt was like, you know, calls him, because the cell service isn't great at the island, but once you can use your phone, but stuff might not just send. And like, I mean, it's not great. You know, you got maybe one bar, it won't work that well. But once you get a little off the island, you have cell coverage. And even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, you know, it was fine. Like we had, you know, enough cell coverage to make a phone call or shoot a text over, but you don't have enough cell coverage to like send a picture, for example. So Wyatt.
So I want to go back.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I want to touch on that real quick, because the phone thing came up at some point. And so was it when you guys got off the boat?
Yeah.
I mean, were people taking their phones off the boat, or is that not typical? Because I know that Nolan's phone was left on the boat,
right?
Even though, you know, after you guys had left. So can you explain that? Because I think people need to understand this a little clearer.
Yeah.
Was it typical for people to have their phones left on boats, or did they keep their phones in the water? Or?
Yeah. I mean, everybody kind of goes out to the island to get away from, you know, their phones and everything else. I know I got on the boat to get away from, you know, just the regular world. And no, when you're waist deep in water, no one's carrying their phone in their hand. Especially at Horn Island, the water has been very, very murky because of the rain. And when it's just very risky. If you're gonna have your phone in the water, you know, some people might for a couple minutes and like maybe taking some pictures of each other. You know, I know a lot of girls like to take pictures in the water at Horn Island. You know, guys do too. You know, like people like to take pictures, and but a lot of the pictures you see are on the boat for a reason. And so, no, I mean, if someone is on their phone in the water, they're using it real quick and then putting it right back on the boat. We were all waist deep in water. No one's sitting there scrolling on their phone. I never saw that once. And I've never seen that once. And I've been out the Highland my whole life. I mean, that's just not something people do. People aren't on their phones. And everybody has their phone, yes, but it's always on the boat. No one's getting off the boat with their phone. So.
And so you guys get ready to leave out of there, getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, the last time I saw Nolan was 3:00, and Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie, Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, dude, you crazy. I was like just joking with him. And, but anyway, Nolan, that was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving, obviously, no one is getting left at the island that came with us unless they demanded to, you know, be there and asked, you know. This is a very common thing at Horn Island. When you're out there, a lot of people ride out there with someone and in with somebody else all the time. I've done that 100 times. You know, it's a very common thing. But Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues. And like, no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear, but it's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on the boat. Nolan, get on the boat. Get on the boat. We're leaving. If you're coming, you got to come now. And Nolan made a decision to stay out on the island. And like he said, you know.
How many people heard that? Were there just,
at least
just a
5
few?
I mean, everyone that was on our boat right there, because the Palm Beach had already left. My buddy went ahead and went home on the Palm Beach, and 3 guys on the way back. And Nolan wasn't the only person to ride out there with us and in with somebody else. I mean, we had multiple people in our group that rode out with us and rode in on someone else's boat. And that, like I said, that's not an uncommon thing to do, you know? I mean, a lot of people do that. I could name probably 50 people out there that day that ran out with somebody and ran back in with somebody else. So, I mean, it's not like it's an uncommon thing, but it's not like we just left him there or my friends just left him there. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island after my friends asked him multiple times and told him to get on the boat, and he decided to stay.
And I heard the girl that he was with, Katie, had text somebody that she heard people yelling for Nolan to get on it. Is that true?
And I have a picture of that. She texted my buddy, and the next day everybody was panicking and everybody's texting Katie, you know, because she was obviously seen with Nolan the whole day at the island. Katie sent a message to my buddy the next day and said, you know, this is the last time I saw him, you know, he's really sweet. But she also mentioned that the last time she saw Nolan was when my buddy was yelling at him to get on the boat. And she was right there to see that Nolan decided not to.
Yeah, and so you guys get in the boat, you start to get towed in, and you make it back. Now explain how did you get to the point where you were concerned about Nolan? Because obviously you said, hey, Nolan, y'all need to, or somebody, not
when
you,
did I get
but
to that point?
You guys had made mention Nolan needed to get on a boat. He didn't. You guys get back to wherever you're going. Explain that. Did you guys go back to somebody's house, or you guys like what happened there? And then when did you feel like, well, wait a minute, where's Nolan?
Right. Okay. Well, running in was very chaotic. I mean, Nolan chose to stay on the island, so my focus wasn't on anything else other than the boat, you know, because if the boat doesn't get in, then no one gets in. You know, I don't want to sink out there on my buddy's boat, and no one does. But my buddy Wyatt jumped out and pulled the plug on the boat once we kind of got out there, because he got the motor to trim down. And the motor trimmed down, my buddy Wyatt pulled the plug, and we planed off. We moved all the weight to the front of the boat so we could plane off. And eventually we planed off, and the boat was running. So when you're planed off and you have water in the boat and you're hauling, you know, we're going pretty fast. We're going probably 40, 42 miles an hour. And so all that excess water that was built up in the boat is coming out of the boat. So, I mean, that's what we had to do. So we ran into Fort Bayou, and we didn't just run straight to my buddy's grandparents' house. We ran into Fort Bayou. A couple of us jumped in the water, and Wyatt, like, the whole reason for the stop was so Wyatt could hop in and put the plug back in the boat. So then after that, we went and docked it, and I went back to my buddy's house, and we ate and, you know, napped for a little bit. It was a long day at the island, so, you know, we were all tired. And eventually we go over to a girlfriend of mine. She was having people over for 4th of July. We were doing like fireworks and stuff. So we all went over there to swim and, you know, hang out. And
this infamous picture that I've seen online of Nolan in the water in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Where is this picture associated with? Because you said you guys went back to swim. Nolan wasn't with you. Yeah. So where is this picture?
The people who knew Nolan describe a very particular kind of personality, and what stands out is how consistently that description shows up across people who weren't necessarily coordinating their stories for the cameras. His best friend, Javon Williams, told the Biloxi Sun-Herald in an on-record interview that Nolan had followed the same pattern for years. If he went somewhere with you, he came back with you. Williams said almost the exact same thing independently to CNN, insisting this was something Nolan had done every single time. We'll circle back to why that detail matters, because it ties directly into one of the most contested parts of the timeline, the claim that Nolan simply chose to stay behind while his friends left the island. Teachers reached out to Nolan's family after his death to share their own memories of him, while classmates and teammates painted a picture of a young man who showed up early, backed up the people around him, and seemed to know where his life was headed. His football teammates, both from high school and his brief stretch at the college level, described someone whose life was clearly moving forward. He had plans, a spot on a roster, and parents who fully expected to keep watching him play college football. None of this makes Nolan flawless, and no honest telling of this case should turn him into a saint or a mystery figure. It simply gives us a clearer sense of an ordinary 18-year-old whose life was heading exactly where his family and friends expected it to go. That matters, because understanding who Nolan was helps us weigh the claims about what he may or may not have done that afternoon. So now, let's build the timeline the same way investigators had to, piece by piece, using GPS data, dispatch audio, witness statements, and what Nolan's family has said. Throughout, one distinction needs to stay clear. Documented evidence and statements from the people involved are not the same thing. Blurring the two is a big part of why this case has become so hard to follow online. According to GPS data obtained by CBS News and the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat carrying Nolan and his friends left the dock around 9:56 that morning and reached Horn Island by roughly 11:14. Those portions of the timeline are documented fact. The afternoon itself seems to have played out like a typical, busy 4th of July on that stretch of the Mississippi coast. Boats anchored nearby, large crowds gathered on the island. Multiple reports put the day's total attendance at over 200 people. At some point that afternoon, according to the family's account, Nolan met a young woman named Katie, whose identity later became public through statements from her own family. We'll get into Katie's account in more depth later, but for now what matters is that Nolan spent part of the afternoon in her company. Then, sometime mid-afternoon, the boat Nolan and his friends had arrived on ran into mechanical trouble. Based on statements from a parent of one of the friends, along with dispatch audio later obtained by NBC News through a public records request, the boat's bilge pump failed and the vessel started taking on water. That dispatch recording is documented evidence, and it captures the boat operator calling for towing assistance. GPS records confirm the boat finally left Horn Island around 4:31 that afternoon. This is where the timeline gets far more complicated. Nolan wasn't on that boat when it pulled away. According to 3 friends who were present and later spoke with investigators, Nolan decided to stay on the island, intending to head back to the mainland later, reportedly with a different group, possibly connected to Katie and the people she'd come with. That's the account the friend group has given. But Nolan's mother has pushed back on key parts of that version, and the disagreement isn't just a difference in general impression. It centers on specific questions about what Nolan actually intended to do, who he was with, and what exactly was said before that boat left. In theory, those are details that could be pinned down by cross-checking witness accounts, records, and the timing of events. Later that night, around 11 p.m., one of Nolan's friends called the Coast Guard, while Christine Wansley reported her son missing to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. By that point, the question was no longer just why Nolan had stayed behind. It had become what happened in the hours between the boat leaving and the search for him beginning.
Nolan Wells, death threats are flying. One actually says there's going to be blood, so much blood. Another death threat says, don't go outside. How can anybody do their jobs when they're getting death threats? Not only that, we understand this case is headed to a grand jury. We also learned tonight that the state's autopsy is complete, but is being kept secret. Isn't an autopsy a public document? Why is it being kept hidden from us, the public? What is in that autopsy, the first autopsy of Nolan Wells?
Young lady Katie that he was hanging out with. I saw a text message from her alluding to the fact that she never saw him get on that boat at all. They could have been saying, don't die or is it dead, referring to the bilge pump. Somebody would have seen something if there was a dramatic commotion like this occurring on that boat.
I hope Nolan Wells died by accident. I'm not shutting down our Crime Stories investigation.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can you all please come? We have a membership. Hey, up! Shut the f*** up!
Sound is real. There's no getting away from that. And all this business about there's no connection, well, I listened to a good 40 seconds of SETO, S-E-A, second word T-O-W, on hold, listen to their music. There was plenty good connection, but before I can even get to the death threats of blood, so much blood everywhere, and don't step outside, and more, before I can even get to the grand jury, before I can get to the autopsy that's being kept hidden from us, I want you to meet someone very important, critical to this investigation. Her name, Janetta Brantley. Miss Brantley is the audio engineer who enhanced the 911 call, the SETO call, in the Nolan Wells case. So everybody claiming some ding-dong on YouTube did it, or somebody on Insta or TikTok did it, no. She did it. I've spoken to her. I've read her statement. I want you to judge her credibility. Credibility is normally the sole province of a jury, and tonight you serve in that function. Miss Brantley, I'm sure that you're getting all sorts of abuse, threats, and so forth. It's a cacophony that seemingly won't cease. That said, thank you for being with us tonight. Explain to me where you got the audio, how you got the audio, and what, if anything, you did to enhance the audio.
First and foremost, I basically downloaded it off of YouTube from WLOX News's YouTube site. And when I downloaded it, I ripped it off of YouTube. That's the terminology that we use when we take something off of YouTube. But when I ripped it off of YouTube, Pause. And I pulled it in.
Pause, please. Miss Brantley, isn't it true
Yes.
that the audio you got was taken directly by XLO from DMR, correct? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, please continue, Miss Brantley.
So when I downloaded it from YouTube, I pulled it into my DAW, which is Logic Pro X. And when I first listened to it, I realized that it was like a dual, which most, most phone services or operators utilize when they're recording conversations. And so it was already split between the caller, the dispatch, and the callers in the background. And so that's what made it easy for me to isolate it without having to do much to it. So that isolation, when I separated the left channel from the right channel, that just made me be able to really focus on everything that was called. And then what I was hearing was I honestly could not believe what I was hearing.
Miss Janetta Brantley, isn't it true this is the same audio that was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Let's listen.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can you all please come? We have a membership. Hey, up! Shut the f*** up! What'd you say? It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. We're going down now. I don't know the phone number. It's either. I think it's. Try that. Everybody was on this phone. I know we have a membership, guaranteed. I don't have the tag on here. It got ripped off. What? No, we do not need that. Well, worth it. Better jump in and pull the plug while you're going. Take it out of gear. Hello. Take it out of gear. Okay, we're west tip of Horn, and Our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go! Hey, we're at the west tip of Bourne, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go! David Bart? David Bart? David Bart?
Back to Janetta Brantley joining us tonight, and she shows herself in that video showing what she is doing. What does adding EQ mean, Ms. Brantley?
Adding EQ is basically selecting a certain frequency of the actual sound and either deleting or removing a certain noise, something that's problematic to the ear, deleting that or boosting that. That's literally all EQing is.
What was your process, Janetta? Because I was sitting researching. It was early in the morning, like 5:45 a.m. several days ago, and I was researching the Nolan Wells case, and I saw the transcript as it was being played. And my husband was also up. He said, "What's wrong?" I'm like, if this is real, this changes everything. It changes everything. Because up until that point, it seemed as if Nolan's death could very well have been an accident. If this is real, it changes everything. It's seismic. What was your reaction when you heard these words, Janetta Brantley?
I think at my core, I was in disbelief. I wasn't cleaning it or enhancing it to specifically look for or identify a crime or even point the fingers at anybody. I believe I wanted it to be an accident. I think a lot of us wanted it to be an accident. So when I heard those things, when I heard, "Damn it, Bart," that name stood out to me because I hadn't even heard that name before. As I was listening to certain things that stood out to me, I was in disbelief because, again, I'm just an audio engineer. I'm not an investigator, a detective, or anything like that. So when I heard a name that I wasn't familiar with, it stood out to me, and that alone made me want to hear what was immediately said after "Damn it, Bart." And so that's why in that process where "Damn it, Bart" came in loud and clear to me, I decided to go over to the next part to hear what the rest of that statement was, which is where you saw me actually create a loop over that part, split that part, and then add a gain, which the gain is boosting the volume overall. And that's pretty much what you saw me do in that actual video. And so to hear, "Damn it, Bart, Nolan's really dead now," that I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
My reaction too, Janetta, because when I first heard it, I thought this has got to be doctored. This can't be real. Don't move. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer Franz Borghardt, a veteran trial lawyer joining us out of the Baton Rouge jurisdiction at Borghardt's law firm. Franz, take off your defense hat just one moment. I have introduced wiretaps many times at trials, which are very hard to get, by the way. And I've never had one that I believed was doctored at the time because they were taken by law enforcement. This is from a completely independent source with no dog in the fight, no skin in the game. It's from dispatch at Cito. And if this is real, this blows the case wide up. Now, you saw Janetta Brantley. You've heard her. I have no reason to disbelieve anything she's saying.
So if I'm prosecuting this, I'm worried that I need a witness in 2026 to exclude the possibility that it's either AI generated or doctored, just like you suggested. And I think that she's very credible, but I think we need to go one step further. The other concern I have, Nancy, is if the independent autopsy is showing inconclusive death results, now I really want to see the other autopsy to see, is there trauma to the body? Is there something that happened? These are the concerns I would have as a prosecutor.
Before we talk about obstructions such as allegedly lying or covering something up, you've already mentioned two distinct lines of inquiry. One is that the audio that Janetta Brantley enhanced innocently, I believe, had been already AI or doctored. Okay, let's follow that through to its logical conclusion. You just throw that out there like a stink bomb at the circle. You know what a circle meeting is, right? In the United Methodist Church, all the ladies have circle meetings. Okay. To suggest this was doctored before Janetta got it means it had to have been doctored or AI created by who? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. No, don't just go, that doesn't work in court, Burkhartz. You can't just throw, that's like the sod defense. Some other dude did it. What dude? What are you talking about? So you're saying AI doctored by who? If it's not Janetta, then who? She got it. The same sound that was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. What? You think they doctored it?
There is nothing normal about this case. And if the
That's not what I asked you. I'm asking you to explain your premise, and you're not doing it.
I said if I were a prosecutor, I would want to be able to establish with expert testimony that what we are listening to is real. And I would want a witness, because I'm telling you, with this case, with as viral as it's been, I'm not disagreeing that it's real. I'm saying I would want to be able to bolster that very credible woman's testimony, and she is very credible. I have no doubt that what we're listening to and what she did is credible. The issue is I don't know if she can go the distance to say,
okay,
right,
got it. She cannot testify as to whether MDMR had enhanced it or doctored it before it was released. But see, the problem is, you would have to ask someone to believe a clerk or an official at the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources doctored this before they released it, to the extent that nobody could understand it until they enhanced it. That's a hell of a doctor job. Okay, so you did that. Then you got into the medical examiner findings. Okay, what was your theory on that? Very quickly.
If he's dead on the boat, how did he die? It should be conclusive. It shouldn't be inconclusive.
Joining us right now, Joseph Scott Morgan, renowned death investigator, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, with a premier criminal pro department and building, author of Blood Beneath My Feet, star of a hit series, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan, and it goes on. Significant, over 10,000 death scenes under his belt. Joe Scott, follow up. I'm not arguing with Burkhartz. Let's learn, if we can, from what he's saying. Jump.
Yeah, so whatever has been the causal factors here has got to marry up with what they were seeing at the scene, and perhaps the audio does fall into this, these statements. And I think that probably from a medical legal perspective, that is the coroner and the medical examiner are going to want to be able to fully appreciate what is being said here from a timeline. This is absent the police's investigation. They're going to try to rule in or rule out what they're seeing presenting on Nolan's remains when they finally did receive them at the state medical examiner's office and that examination began. And this is going to be critical and key, because the causal effects here are going to be critical. We go back to these changes that the second autopsy referred to on the back of the head. Now, the doctor was not able to, at that point in time, even though he did do a thorough, what's referred to as a layered dissection here, he could not establish the causal effects here, because the injury or the insult that you see there, this presentation, is compromised by decomposition. So what did the state medical examiner see? My problem is here, Nancy, how was the body treated before or after the first autopsy and the body is transported up to DC? I have questions about this because they're talking about to the degree with which the body was decomposed. The doctor up in DC is seeing significant decomposition. We don't know what they saw in Mississippi, but I do know that you're only talking about and I'm ballparking here, please give me some grace, maybe 48 hours tops before the medical legal authorities have seen the body. So how far degraded is the body to compromise any of this? And this evidence is going to have to be borne out, not just with the physical findings that you see with the unaided eye, but also whatever's going on toxicologically.
I want you to take a careful look at this video we have obtained. Let's see it. Look how tightly everyone is packed in. There were hundreds of people out on Horn Island on July the 4th. What, nobody saw what happened to Nolan Wells? They all just left with him standing there stranded, waving his arms like Gilligan? That did not happen. Now that you're seeing this, what is an innocent explanation? I'm trying to figure that out. Joining me, and I'll circle back to you, Joe Scott, because I got a lot of questions regarding the way he could have died innocently and been left behind, and that sound being true. The sound that Janetta Brantley enhanced. Is there any innocent explanation? Is there a way, as my favorite judge often said, Luther Alverson, it is your duty to make all witnesses speak the truth and impugn perjury to no one. Is there a way that can be done? I don't know that it can. It seems to me that someone is lying. But who? Joining me now, Teslin Figaro, social justice, political commentator, host of the Teslin Figaro podcast. Ms. Figaro, thank you for being with us. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, that's what the family is saying. They don't believe he died by accident. That's the point. That's the reason why Nolan Wells' mom is saying, I don't believe this. I don't believe he died by accident before we had the audio. The audio simply confirms that there are additional questions that needs to be asked. It wasn't just one thing they said in the audio. They said Nolan repeatedly in the audio. They said check his chest in the audio. They said, is he dead in the audio? And also notice this, Nancy. Did you notice that the operator also said, is anybody breathing? Who says that? What operator says who all is breathing on the boat? So is this all the audio, Nancy? Is there more audio? That's my question.
I want to look specifically, Teslin, at what was said. At one point, we think, you killed him? He's already dead. He's already dead? Is he dead? Yeah, Nolan, OMG, wake up. And as Janetta stated, then she hears a completely different name, Bart. Now, we also hear, and I'm very curious, the phrase, no. Teslin Figaro, was that a nickname of Nolan Wells?
I cannot confirm if that's a nickname of his or not. But what I do know is we heard Nolan. What I do know is we heard check his chest. What I do know is that we said, is he dead? What we do know is we heard screams. There's folks out there suggesting that perhaps they were talking to a seagull or perhaps talking to some random bird that was flying around that's called no. There were folks out there that suggested, well, maybe they were talking about the boat. Come on, we got to knock this off, Nancy. We heard what we heard. And so if we were to put this before a jury,
Also, we hear, damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Repeating it over and over and over. According to reports, his nickname, one of them, is No-No. Back to Tesla and Figaro. What is Nolan's mother's theory about what happened in light of these tapes?
Before we even had the tapes, her theory is, I told my son, I've raised my son just like I've raised my 19-year-old the same way, Nancy, like I'm sure you raise your children. Come back with the people you went with. Her theory has always been that he is a fantastic swimmer, that he is an athlete. Her theory has always been that he did not drown. Her theory has always been that there's something wrong with this picture. Her theory has always been that the fact that, he left his phone and left his keys. Her theory has also always been that he did not just go off with some random stranger and say, guys, don't worry about it, just leave me on an island. Her theory is the same thing before this audio. This audio only confirms what this mother already knew.
The search for Nolan Wells brought together the Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and volunteer teams. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger located Nolan in the water near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. He was identified through dental records, and the Jackson County coroner stated there were no immediately obvious signs of physical trauma. In those early days, the sheriff's office also said nothing at that point suggested a crime had taken place. Those are the bare facts. Everything else in this case, the interviews, the phone, the disputed timeline, the viral evidence, has to be weighed against them. The most critical unresolved stretch is the roughly 90 minutes between around 3 p.m., when Nolan was reportedly last seen by members of the group, and 4:31 p.m., when GPS data confirms the boat pulled away from the island. On a packed holiday beach, 90 minutes is more than enough time for countless small conversations and movements that nobody would naturally recall with precision. That's exactly why every confident claim about this narrow window deserves careful scrutiny. By the friend group's account, the boat developed a bilge pump problem and had to leave in a hurry. They say Nolan chose to stay behind. But the account from Katie's family points somewhere else entirely. It says Nolan gave Katie the impression he planned to return to the original boat. Both versions can't be fully accurate at once, and the gap between them comes down to those same 90 minutes. Which brings us to Warren's interview with Brandon Tatum. Warren hasn't been charged with anything, and law enforcement hasn't publicly identified him as a suspect. He gave his account voluntarily, in public, which is exactly why his precise wording has drawn scrutiny. This isn't an accusation. It's a closer read of an inconsistency inside a public statement. Early in the interview, Warren was asked when he'd last seen Nolan. His answer was direct. The last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. A little later, describing the group's departure, Warren said Nolan was sitting near the boat and that his friends were calling for him to get on. That's the core contradiction. If 3 o'clock truly marked the last time Warren saw him, how could he later describe Nolan's exact location around 4:30? Both statements can't literally be true together. There are at least two possible explanations. Warren may have merged separate memories while recounting a chaotic, emotional afternoon. Human memory tends to lose precision under stress, especially after an event has been retold repeatedly. Or there's a gap in the timeline that Warren simply didn't spell out clearly. One recorded interview isn't enough to tell us which. What is clear is that Tatum never paused to ask Warren to reconcile the two statements. That's significant, because a formal investigative interview serves a different purpose than a media conversation. Investigators are expected to circle back to contradictions and press for clarity. This interview just kept moving. The same problem shows up when Warren's version is set against the statement given on Katie's family's behalf. According to that statement, Nolan was talking with Katie, and she believed he was heading back toward the boat. She then left safely on a different boat. The friend group's version says Nolan chose to stay on the island and keep talking with her. Those are two different descriptions of the same final exchange. It's worth noting Katie's account is also secondhand in the public record. It came through her sister rather than a direct on-camera interview with Katie herself, so it should be weighed with that limitation in mind. What she believed Nolan intended to do isn't necessarily proof of what actually happened next. There's a broader memory issue at play too. People often reconstruct timelines after something traumatic, unconsciously filling gaps with whatever seems logical. Retelling something publicly can make a fuzzy memory sound far more precise than it originally was. So Warren's contradiction could well be an honest slip. But it also means investigators should compare his public account against his formal, individual interview once that information is available. The sheriff's office has said witnesses are being interviewed separately as part of the ongoing investigation. That matters because separate interviews cut down the risk of repeated group conversations reshaping everyone's memory into one shared version. If Warren's formal statement matches what he said publicly, that's meaningful. If it doesn't, that's meaningful too. Right now, the public simply doesn't have that answer. The case has also produced viral evidence that ultimately didn't hold up. One such claim involved a boat video where a voice appears to say, "Give me my freaking phone." Ben Crump initially said he believed the voice belonged to Nolan. Trayson Shepard later told ABC News the voice was actually his, tied to a completely separate incident. Crump acknowledged the conflicting accounts and said audio experts would be brought in to determine whose voice it was. Now, Nolan's phone. According to the family, the phone stayed with friends after they left the island and was later tracked down through Life 360. When the family went through it, they said Snapchat content from July 4th was missing, even though they checked it before the platform's usual expiration window. That raised questions about whether something had been deleted or was otherwise unaccounted for. That claim, though, hasn't been independently confirmed as a forensic finding. One friend told ABC News that leaving phones on the boat during swimming was standard practice, meant to protect them from saltwater, and that Nolan's was simply one of roughly 15 phones left behind. Poor connectivity on a remote island could also explain gaps in Snapchat content. The most important development here is that the family and investigators have agreed to a joint, simultaneous inspection of Nolan's phone. Both sides get to examine the exact same data through the exact same process. That should go a long way toward establishing whether anything was actually deleted, whether the missing content has a simple technical explanation, and what the device might reveal about Nolan's final hours. The medical evidence carries just as much weight, and it's still incomplete. Mississippi carried out an initial autopsy, but full findings and toxicology were still pending as of this script. The family also arranged an independent autopsy in Washington, D.C., handled by a pathologist outside the state. That exam was partly funded by Colin Kaepernick, while Tyler Perry covered funeral costs, according to the family's legal team. The independent results hadn't been made public either. Forensic pathology in a water-related death isn't as simple as checking for water in the lungs. Examiners weigh possible drowning indicators, internal and external trauma, environmental factors, and toxicology together. Water exposure and decomposition can complicate the picture, and lab testing takes real time. That's exactly why the final reports carry so much more weight than confident guesses made on social media. There's also the planned grand jury presentation. The district attorney has said the case will go forward once the sheriff's investigation wraps up. A grand jury referral isn't the same thing as criminal charges. It simply means evidence gets presented to determine whether probable cause exists for an indictment. The sheriff's public language has shifted over time as well. Early on, his office said nothing pointed to a crime. Since then, officials have confirmed an active investigation, individual witness interviews, contact with the FBI, and the use of additional forensic resources. That doesn't mean authorities have declared a crime occurred. It means the investigation has widened and deepened as more information has surfaced. Nolan's best friend, Javon Williams, added another layer of context. He said Nolan had never once been the type to stay behind after his friends left together, that this was a long-standing pattern with him. Nolan's parents have echoed something similar, saying they raised him with a simple rule: if you go somewhere with the group, you leave with the group. Then there's the GPS data. The boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. and didn't head straight back to its home dock. The data shows extra movement, including a stop near Fort Bayou, before it eventually returned. Later that night, it went to a boat launch and was apparently towed overland to the owner's home. The wider context around this case has also fueled intense public debate, including questions about race. Nolan was among relatively few black attendees in the larger group on Horn Island that day. Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump have both said the family isn't claiming race explains what happened, while also arguing it shouldn't be dismissed outright as something worth examining. That's a different thing from accusing any specific person of acting out of racial bias. So where does the case actually stand right now? Here's what's documented. Nolan was 18 and went to Horn Island with friends on July 4th. GPS data confirms the boat's movements, including its 4:31 departure. A distress call went out after the boat's bilge pump failed. A Coast Guard call followed later that night. Nolan was reported missing, and his remains were recovered by a National Park Service ranger on July 6th. Identification came through dental records, with no immediately obvious signs of trauma reported. Both the state and independent autopsy results remain pending. The joint phone inspection has been agreed to. The sheriff's investigation is still active, and the district attorney plans to bring the case before a grand jury once that investigation concludes. The disputed points matter just as much. Did Nolan intend to head back to the original boat, as Katie's family statement suggests, or did he choose to stay, as the friend group insists? Was the voice in that viral confrontation clip Nolan's or Trayson Shepard's? And why did Warren say his last sighting of Nolan was 3 o'clock, only to later describe Nolan's exact position at 4:30? The unknowns loom even larger. The public still doesn't have a final cause and manner of death. We don't know what the phone examination will turn up. We don't know what evidence a grand jury might eventually hear. And we don't know whether Warren's conflicting statements reflect an honest memory slip or something investigators will need to dig into further. Which brings us back to the question in the title. What was the critical detail so many people missed? It wasn't a confession. It wasn't proof that Warren caused anything. The mistake was that the interview contained a contradiction that was never worked out. Warren said his last sighting of Nolan was 3 o'clock, then went on to describe Nolan's specific spot by the boat around 4:30. The interviewer never paused to ask him to reconcile the two. That's a fair reason for investigators to revisit the question in a formal setting. It isn't, on its own, proof Warren was hiding anything, and it certainly isn't proof anyone caused Nolan's death. That distinction matters, because everyone connected to this case is living with the fallout of what gets said online. Warren, Katie, Trayson Shepard, Javon Williams, and the rest of the friend group are young people facing intense public scrutiny while also grieving a friend. Nolan's parents are mourning their son while they wait for answers. None of that erases the legitimate, documented questions. But those questions deserve to be investigated without turning uncertainty into accusation. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was a son, a friend, and a person whose life was so much bigger than the unanswered questions now surrounding his final day. Eventually, the investigation will have to separate what can be proven from what can only be suspected. Until then, the most responsible thing any of us can do is keep the categories straight. What's confirmed, what's disputed, and what's still unknown. Rest easy, Nolan. And for everyone following this case, the goal shouldn't be the fastest theory or the most dramatic headline. It should be the truth, whatever that truth turns out to be. The facts matter, boys. Subscribe to Gossip Loom for daily updates on cases like this.